Soul Station Dungeon has 7 branching paths. If you want to clear the dungeon, you have to complete all the paths, and each path has a different reward at the end. The trick is that you need all 7 rewards to be able to clear the dungeon. When players enter one of the paths, the difficulty level is automatically set for 7 people, meaning, if they enter the Nebula's path, they are required to complete the task for 7 people with just the 2 of them. Even Coo Juan thinks it is a difficult way to do it. This dungeon has a famous method. Since it is one of the first dungeons to appear, this dungeon has many obvious strategies, and even the so-called hidden strategies are eventually spread to the public. Naturally, this dungeon even has a record of clearing with fewer members than the recommended number. After standing on the magic circle in front of him, a system notification then appeared. The second path of Soul Station Dungeon, Jugo Path, was activated. You only need to utilize the difficulty level set after the opening of each path. The total of the 7 paths is set for 7 people. So if the difficulty of the first path is set to 7, then the difficulty will decrease with each path opened, until you open all 7 paths, which means each path will have a difficulty of 1. After pondering this, Coo Juan then activated all 7 paths simultaneously, saw him come back. Manhwa then asked if it was done. Coo Juan replied yes. The dungeon clearing conditions did not say that they had to clear all the paths at the same time. This was a nice loophole. Coo Juan then looked back, and the system notification then reappeared asking if he wanted to enter the first path, the Nebula's path. Seeing that, Coo Juan then invited Manhwa to enter. While Coo Juan and Manhwa were in the process of clearing the dungeon, a group of people were seen standing in front of the Soul Station dungeon. They asked what really happened. Was everything okay? The police had isolated the area and did not allow anyone to enter. The police announced that there had been a disaster in Soul Station. They then evacuated the residents and asked them to follow the directions of the police. Seo Yuan was also in the mob. He knew that the dungeon was inside, and suddenly, a man with red skin walked over and looked very annoyed. He also looked down on the police and called them insects. The policemen then looked at him when they heard that, and surprisingly, the feet of the man did not step on the ground at all when approaching them. The man was upset because the policeman had disturbed his livelihood. He also asked why they were in the way. The man just felt that the police were not helping at all. The man had a demon-like appearance, with red skin color, horns, and a tail behind him. They were also surprised when they saw the man's appearance and were surprised when they saw him walking in the air. Seeing him approaching, the police then immediately told him to stop and introduced himself. Seo Yuan also looked surprised when he saw the man. He had seen him once in the tutorial. He was the intermediate administrator, Chris. When thinking about it, Seo Yuan suddenly realized something. If that intermediate administrator was here, then did that mean that player was also here? Seeing Chris, who was not obedient, a policeman then warned him. They would shoot if he continued to approach. The policeman then gave another warning, but before he could even give a word of warning again, Chris suddenly appeared beside him while strangling his neck. In a mocking tone he then asked what he was going to say. He then told him to try to say what he wanted to say earlier. The policeman certainly couldn't do that, let alone talk. Breathing was already difficult for him at this time. Seeing that, the policemen around then told him to let him go. They warned him they would shoot if he didn't let him go, but Chris was not at all afraid of that. While turning his head 180 degrees, he then dared them to try it. Hearing that, they then immediately shot at him, but their shots could not even hit him, because it was held by a barrier that covered Chris's body. Chris then grinned and pulled out a blood clot from his fingers. Chris then threw the blood clot towards them, who also managed to block their shots. A policeman was then surprised when he saw the clot approaching towards him. Then, the blood clot suddenly turned into a fire that burned them. They could only scream for help while feeling hot, and they then decided to retreat. Chris just smiled dismissively at that. He felt that insects like them were always noisy, so Yuan could only be silent to see the incident. After clearing the police, Chris then asked them, since I had cleared everything that was in the way, shouldn't you start playing, you damn player? Now that he saw, it turned out that there were quite famous insects here too. A man then suddenly appeared next to Chris while greeting Seo Yuan. This was their first meeting since the tutorial. After seeing the man's appearance, Seo Yuan also seemed to recognize him. The man asked if it had been about a month. He then grinned. The man was Seo Juan, a player. He didn't expect to see Seo Yuan here like this. Seo Yuan said that it had been a long time. Seo Yuan had guessed that this person also survived the tutorial. he really couldn't forget the incident at that time, during the goblin attack. He was covered in blood and continued to pile up the corpses of the goblins. Other people were busy running away, but he enjoyed the massacre. Honestly, it made him a little scared, but he knew he was a very skilled person. Seo Juan then asked, is he also here to clean up the Soul Station dungeon? Even though he asked like that, but he already had a guess. There is no way a player of Seo Yuan's caliber does not understand how the world has changed. Things like that will continue to appear, changing the world forever. While looking at the entrance portal to the dungeon, he then continued. Inside, opportunities beyond their wildest dreams await them. This is an opportunity that a player should not miss. So Yuan just stayed silent hearing that. The intermediate administrator said that they needed 7 people for this place. He only had 6 people now, so he then invited Seo Yuan to join him, while the people outside were still busy forming groups to clean up the dungeon. Hyujin and Manhwa were already in the process of cleaning up and entering the first path, the path of Nepilas. When they arrived there, they were then confronted by a horde of black yak monsters that had level 12. The black yaks immediately realized their presence as soon as they entered, but Hyujin then moved quickly and cut off one of the horns of a black yak. It succeeded in making the black yak fall immediately. The black yaks were then very angry when they saw that he had subverted their kind. Hyujin was not at all afraid to see it. They had many things to do later, so he invited Manhwa to finish this hunt quickly and continue. The black yaks angrily rushed towards them. Hyujin, who saw that, then got ready. When the distance between them was close, Hyujin then swung his sword, which then managed to cut off the horns of the black yak. A system notification then appeared telling him that the black yak had been killed. Seeing that Hyujin had killed its kind again, the black yak angrily screamed and rushed towards him, but Hyujin was able to quickly dodge, after which he then jumped on the black yak, then landed smoothly on its back. Hyunjin then immediately slashed the black yak's handlebar horns, which then killed it. After killing the black yak, without any delay, Hyujin then rushed towards the other black yak that was heading towards him. The battle between the two of them was completely without tension at all. Hyujin was able to kill the black yak with one slash of his sword. Hyujin then sighed with relief after finally managing to kill at least 30 black yaks. Manhwa had also finished her battle. She then asked about the skills he used. Hyujin was confused about it, while demonstrating the actions that Hyujin used to make the black yaks lie down. She then asked if everyone could do it. She had seen when other players were hunting, but she had never seen anyone who could do something like that. She asked again what she had to do to be able to do that. Senia also looked curious about it. Hyujin also realized that, so he then just answered carelessly. With the guardians watching, there was no way he could tell her. While glancing at Senia, Hyujin then put a grin on his face. He told Manhwa to keep practicing hard, and she might be able to do it in the future. Senia was then very upset to see that. The guardians could only be silent to hear his answer, with some who were even amazed by his actions. Manhwa also looked unsure of the answer. She asked if it was just by practicing hard. Hyujin answered yes and assured her, practice so that she doesn't have regrets. If she tries her best in every moment, then she will be able to do it. That's also what Hyujin has done in his previous life, even though she didn't really understand, but she still believed it because Hyujin was the one who said it. But she was then suddenly surprised by something. A floating ring suddenly appeared near them. She then reported it to him. Hearing that, they then both looked at the ring in confusion. Hyujin then immediately took the ring. He was originally curious when this ring would appear. With this, they had successfully cleared the Nepilas path. Hyujin then invited Manhwa to head to the next path. Manhwa was confused at that and asked if they didn't need to kill all the monsters. Hearing that, Hyujin then replied that it was not necessary. The monsters didn't even give them much EXP. Manhwa originally thought they had to kill them all, like when they killed the wolves in Cheonggyecheon. Hyujin also remembered the incident at that time, but leaving them alone was better for now, because he knew they were not the only ones who entered here. As Hyujin thought, they were indeed not the only ones who entered the dungeon, because Seo Yuan's party was also already in the dungeon. Looking at the cave in front of him, Seo Yuan felt that this dungeon was very different from the D-Tower dungeon. This was like a cave-based system. This reminded him of the tutorial dungeon, because this was also the second dungeon that opened. He then asked Seo Yuan, doesn't this make him feel nostalgic? But Seo Yuan said that it was not a good memory. More than 10 people who were with him died, and he was not strong enough to kill the boss monster on the second floor. because of his failure. Seo Juan then smiled slightly when he saw him brooding sadly. He then invited them to move forward. The sooner they finish this and return, the safer it will be for them. Hearing that, they then both went deeper, but they were then surprised when they saw that there were so many branching paths in front of them. They then asked if they had to enter them in a certain order or what. They were also confused by the glowing foothold in front of them. It didn't take too long for Seo Juan to make a decision. He then invited them to enter the closest path first, the first path. While Seo Juan's party had just entered the first path, Hyujin and Sunhwa had managed to find another item that was used as a condition for clearing the path. The item was called the Diogo necklace. Hyujin also felt that finding the item was much faster than finding the Nepla's ring. Sunhwa then asked, were they going to head to the third path now? Hyujin answered yes. He felt that Sunhwa seemed to have begun to understand the concept of key items. Getting key items was much more important than killing monsters. But Sunhwa then suddenly scratched the back of her head while looking hesitant. She suddenly apologized to him. Hyujin was then confused to hear that, and asked what for. Sunhwa apologized because she felt she was a bit slow. She saw the way he hunted. By the time she was only able to break the horn of a black yak, he had cut down many of them. He was strong enough to do all this alone, and she felt she had become a burden. But Hyujin then immediately denied that. He asked, had she ever seen him do anything useless? Sunhwa seemed to realize something and answered no. Hyujin then told her to listen well. He didn't sympathize with her because she was still a child. If she understood that, he then invited her to immediately go to the third path. After a while, they then arrived at the third path, the Delancha path. When they arrived there, Sunhwa was then surprised, because instead of being black, the yaks there were purple. Their level also rose to level 14. The yaks also realized their presence. They then prepared to attack. But Sunhwa was then surprised, because instead of charging forward like the previous type of yak, the yaks shot the horns on their heads towards them. The horns then hit Sunhwa right in the forehead, but the attack did not seem fatal. Hyujin then asked if it hurt. Sunhwa replied no, but something flew towards her head. After seeing what hit her earlier, she was surprised because it turned out to be a horn. Seeing that, Hyujin then explained, purple yaks can shoot their horns to attack. She could consider it a long-range attack of purple yaks. Hyujin then calmed her down. He also asked back, you said this doesn't hurt, right? Although a little hesitant, but Sunhwa then confirmed it. Then, Hyujin then said that he would hand them over to her, while looking at the purple yaks who angrily rushed towards them. Sunhwa was then dumbfounded to hear that. The yaks then attacked Sunhwa using their horn shots repeatedly. Sunhwa looked overwhelmed in blocking the attacks. Even so, she managed to block them all. Seeing that, Hyujin praised her. She was better at blocking than he thought, but Sunhwa asked him not to say that just because she was unharmed. This still felt scary to her, even though she said so. But Hyujin knew that the yaks could not hurt her at all. Hyujin then told her to use taunt now. Hearing that, Sunhwa then used taunt. A layer of energy suddenly enveloped her. The yaks who saw it suddenly felt provoked, then immediately attacked her back with their horn shots. Sunhwa could only protect her body parts to block the attack, but she was then surprised and confused when their attack suddenly stopped. A system notification then appeared telling her that she had gained EXP. Sunhwa still felt confused when she saw the yaks who attacked her earlier just fell. Seeing that, Hyujin then explained, the purple yaks would fall if they shot both horns. Sunhwa finally understood after hearing that, and the item they were looking for then finally appeared. It was the key item of the third path, the Delancha bracelet. Now they only needed the remaining 4 key items. Sunhwa then asked, would they just leave again since they had gotten the item? The monsters here gave a lot of EXP, so she hoped they could hunt down the rest. Hearing that, Hyujin then said, he had already explained this to her. There might be other people entering this dungeon besides them. Instead of killing them for themselves, they should leave some for others. Hyujin already had his own considerations doing that. The more monsters they left, the longer it would take them to chase them. Someone from Seo Yuan's party looked very overwhelmed when facing a black yak. He then immediately asked the other party members to help him. Hearing that, Seo Yuan then immediately came and hit the black yak. Seo Yuan then exhaled after doing the action. While the members of Seo Yuan's party who saw the action could only feel shocked. They were shocked because Seo Yuan was able to defeat the black yak with just one punch. He really deserved his title as an tutorial ender. Seo Juan also looked brooding when he saw it. He then picked up the horns of a yak that they had killed. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that the efficiency was not good. They were tough, so it was a little difficult to hunt them. They only realized that the horns were their weak point only after many fights with them. Even after they finished hunting, they didn't get much EXP. He felt that this reward was quite bad for a dungeon. He then asked Seo Yuan's opinion about this. Seo Yuan also agreed with that. According to him, so far they haven't seen anything that makes this dungeon worth clearing. Seo Yuan felt this was strange. There wasn't any final reward after hunting all the yaks, but he already had a guess in his mind regarding their current situation. Sitting like this was meaningless, so he then invited his party to try a different path, and they then entered the second path, the Dugo path. When they arrived there, they were immediately greeted by the sight of a swarm of yaks. The yaks here were also black like in the previous path. But Seo Juan was then surprised when he saw several black yak corpses with broken horns lying near them. Seo Juan looked brooding after seeing that. Seo Yuan asked what he was thinking. Seo Juan then glanced at his party members who were now facing a black yak. He felt this was unusual. There were so many titles and rewards that could be obtained only from the tutorial dungeon. Does this mean they are still far from getting rewards? Or perhaps, someone had claimed the reward before them? But he felt that was highly unlikely. His party was the only one that entered after Chris made a restrictive formation. Also, was there a player that could clear this faster than them since they had Seo Yuan? But he then realized something. Although he felt this was unlikely, but if there was someone who cleared this before him, then maybe he was clearing the middle of the dungeon now. Seo Juan seemed to have made a decision. Seo Yuan also realized that. Seo Juan then invited all his party members to clear the yaks here and try a different path. He suspected that they might have missed something. Seo Juan thought that Hyujin was still in the middle of the dungeon now. But in fact he was already on the sixth path. Victoria's path. They looked very tired after clearing the yaks there. And the key item they had been looking for finally appeared shortly after that. Seeing the shape of the key item in front of him, Hyujin pondered for a moment. He thought that a shield-shaped reward would be the best for a tanker, but after he saw it in person, its durability was very low to be used as a shield, so he then just kept it. Manhwa then asked again, are they going to the next path? Hyujin confirmed that. He had gotten a total of 6 key items from the 6 paths they had cleared. Now, they only needed to get the key item from the 7th path. Hearing that, Manhwa then asked, will they finally be able to complete this dungeon? Hyujin answered yes. Everything still looks smooth until now. He then invited Manhwa to leave there. Seeing the magic circle in front, which is the way to the 7th path, Manhwa pondered for a moment about it, but she was then surprised when she suddenly felt the presence of other people besides them there. She then reported it to Hyujin, on the cliff nearby. Seo Juan party was seen watching the two of them. They were also surprised when they saw the two of them. While Seo Yuan himself was very surprised because he recognized who they were. Hyujin had expected them to catch up, but this was longer than he expected. He was sure they must still be beginners. Seo Juan was silent for a moment looking at them. He then smiled broadly because he finally managed to catch the rat that stole his reward. When he saw them, Hyujin realized that they were the people who entered after him. But he didn't care too much about it. He also saw Seo Yuan among them, but he was then surprised when he saw the status window of Seo Yuan. He was surprised and confused when he read Seo Yuan's disposition. He didn't understand how generous and narrow-minded could exist simultaneously in a person's disposition, while Seo Yuan himself didn't expect to meet him in a place like this. But Hyujin didn't consider Seo Yuan as the most important among the group of people. Seo Juan then walked up to him with a friendly smile. He then greeted him. They crossed paths with the monster he was hunting. Seo Juan asked if it was his action. Hyujin confirmed it. This was 10 years ago, that's why he looked younger, but Hyujin was sure it must be him. There'll later be an organization of evil players that sometimes goes by the name of Nightmare, the Demon King's army. They have a fighting force that can face the 8 heroes, and the atrocities they commit cannot be explained in words. They have lieutenants who organize the atrocities, including Seo Juan, a self-proclaimed unusual homicidal maniac. He is very famous among the lieutenants of the Demon King army for his atrocities. Although he had expected to meet one of these bastards someday, but he did not expect it to be so soon. In the midst of his struggling thoughts, Seo Juan then said to him, "Your progress is quite fast. Is it just the two of you who finished it?" Hearing that, Hyujin replied that the two of you are more than enough. Hearing his answer, Seo Juan also said, "The results are enough to prove it. They have seen his work on the way here. The number of people who can enter this dungeon is 7 people. So he then asked, doesn't that mean he needs more people from now on? Hearing that, Hyujin just said he felt he would know if they couldn't continue. He also asked what his meant. A person from Seo Juan's party looked very annoyed when he saw his attitude. Seo Juan then immediately stopped the man who was about to rush forward. He then continued. He had a good offer for him, including himself. Everyone in this group was experienced in hunting compared to the other tutorial participants. He then suggested that they should complete this dungeon together because they also happened to meet. Being able to complete it faster and safer would be better for him. As for them, they could get a share of the completion reward. Everyone would be happy. After all, no one mastered this dungeon. Wouldn't it be great if they worked together? He hoped he could make the right decision. Hyujin was silent for a moment. Hearing that, Manhwa herself was quite confused at his silence. It didn't take long. Hyujin then accepted his offer. But he had one condition: key items from the 7th path, the Lakitula path, must be sold to him. After both parties agreed, Hyujin and Manhwa then entered the 7th path, the Lakitula lane, along with Seo Juan's party. When they got there, they were then confronted by the purple yaks, but that was certainly not a problem for Hyujin, so Yu-hyun and Seo Juan could even finish them quite easily. While the other party members worked together to subvert a yak, Manhwa also felt that it became much faster after they all worked together, but somehow she felt something strange. Hyujin's movements were much slower and less efficient than usual. Before he could do almost everything by himself, but now he looked very tired. She also wondered if he was okay. After killing a purple yak, Seo Juan then pondered for a moment. He wondered what kind of trump card Hyujin had, since he could pass through other paths so quickly. But was he smarter than he thought? Although he had considered the fatigue he felt, but he felt that Hyujin did not look very skilled. And while he was struggling with his thoughts, he suddenly felt something. He then saw a pair of earrings floating nearby. He wondered if this was the key item that Hyujin mentioned. After reading the description of the item, he could not see the use of the item. These earrings had no special features, and their durability was almost at its lowest point. He then wondered what was special about these earrings. Seeing him holding the earrings, Hyujin then asked if he had gotten it. Seo Juan confirmed it. He then handed the item to Hyujin. He also shared his doubts. No matter how much he looked at it, it was just an old earring, so he asked why he needed it. Hearing that, Hyujin then replied, he needed it to complete a mission that could only be obtained by the first player to enter the dungeon. He had all 7 key items now, so he should be able to complete it. Since he had obtained the key item now, he then gave what they had agreed to Seo Juan. Hyujin gave him 500 coins. Seeing that, Seo Juan could only feel surprised. He couldn't believe he really gave him the coins. To get this much coins, he had to hunt at least 40 black yaks. Realizing that, Seo Juan then grinned. He was thinking of robbing him, but he wouldn't let his intentions be too obvious now. He then said that he would help him as much as possible until they got out of the dungeon. Hearing that, Hyujin only said, since he had offered, then he would go even deeper to complete his mission. After getting confirmation from Hyujin, Seo Juan then invited his party members to follow Hyujin all the way. Manhwa was silent for a moment. Seeing that, she then asked if he was sure this was okay. Hyujin was a little surprised by her sudden question. Manhwa then blushingly said that she saw him looking very tired, so she wanted to check it out. Hearing her worries, Hyujin then told her not to worry. Hearing that, Manhwa then asked if she was wrong. Hyujin then suddenly pondered for a moment. Thanks to the eye of perception, he now knew all about Seo Juan's disgusting thoughts by looking at his status window. This may have been 10 years ago, but he was basically such a disgusting person since a long time ago. We'll see when his fake personality and the way he politely called him Sunbae disappeared, and when his true identity appeared. Not knowing that his cover had been blown, Seo Juan then grinned after thinking his plan had succeeded. After going deeper, they then arrived at a spacious room with white marble lining the entire room. Hyujin was relieved that they had finally arrived. In the middle of the room, there was a statue. A system notification then appeared. He had entered the Mandra plaza. The statue then suddenly opened its eyes. Manhwa was quite surprised when she saw it. Seeing that, Hyujin pondered for a moment. Once you clear the 7 paths, the Mandra Plaza will appear. This is why Seoul Station Dungeon is called the final destination for beginners in the original timeline. As for where the name Final Destination came from, it was because no one could find a way to get past the Mandra statue. The Mandra statue suddenly spoke and angrily asked who dared to disturb its sleep. So Yu Hyun was shocked when he heard the statue could talk. The Mandra statue continued. Those who did not qualify had to leave immediately. If they decided to stay, their punishment would be inevitable. They could only be silent. Hearing that, Hyujin then suddenly walked forward. He said to the statue that he did not come all this way to just give up. He came to prove that he was qualified. A blue energy suddenly appeared on Hyujin's left chest. The Mandra statue then looked sharply at him. Faced with the size of the Mandra statue, which was many times the size of his body, Hyujin was not at all afraid. Seeing that, the Mandra statue then told him to prove himself. Right after that, the system window then appeared in front of him. The system window contained an image of the Mandra statue in a cross-legged position, with black spots filling the screen. Seeing that, Hyujin knew it was a qualification-proof process. He had to pass this test to be able to advance in completing the Seoul Station Dungeon. If he failed, whoever tried this challenge would have his heart destroyed. The first challenge was installing key items on the Mandra statue in the order of the path. Hyujin then took out all the key items he had collected from the inventory. During the process of installing the necklace ring, a system notification then appeared asking for confirmation regarding the installation. Seeing that, Hyujin then chose yes. And the ring suddenly turned into a red pearl. It didn't stop there. Hyujin then installed all the key items that he had collected so far. Right after he installed all the key items, the Mandra statue was suddenly seen wearing all the key items he had installed on his body. A strong pressure suddenly fell on them. They were then shocked by it. The Mandra statue then said that he had proven himself. Now, he told him to answer his question. With his face facing him, he then asked what his name was. Hearing that, Hyujin was silent for a moment. He then recalled the video he had watched in the previous timeline which discussed the Seoul Station Dungeon. The person in the video explained, Mandra, this word means horse stable. The Mandra statue is basically a guard who protects the horse stable. This guardian has a simple mission, that there are 7 paths in the vast meadow where the yaks roam. The owner of the meadow hides something there. The statue is tasked with guarding what is hidden until the owner returns. Regarding the hidden reward in Seoul Station Dungeon left by the owner of the stable, if you want to take the treasure, you must answer with a name different from your own name. Hyujin seriously recorded the knowledge in his notebook while watching the video. Back to the present, Hyujin then answered, your owner, the one who has given you a new life. My name is Rancher. The Mandra statue was then shocked when it heard that, while those behind him were shocked and confused when they heard what he said. Although Manhwa didn't know what he was doing, but she still chose to believe him. After hearing his answer, the Mandra statue then knelt before him. It had greeted the owner. The system notification then appeared right after that. He had found the correct answer. He had completed the hidden quest. Hearing that, Hyujin breathed a sigh of relief because he finally got it. The guardians then returned noisy when they saw his action. They also released a variety of reactions they conveyed. Manhwa was amazed when she saw the statue kneeling in front of Hyujin, while Seo Yuan's party members themselves were confused why the statue suddenly knelt down. They also wondered what was meant by the owner. They didn't understand what kind of notification it was. Even so, they then didn't care too much, because everything had ended well. So Yu Hyun was originally worried that something would happen, but as he thought, Hyujin was really not an ordinary person. The Mandra statue then handed him a list of items. It said these were the items he left to it. It asked him to choose one of them and take it with him. Looking at the list of items, Hyujin realized that this was a hidden reward in Seoul Station Dungeon. It would be helpful if he got it as early as possible, taking into account the place that would be his next destination. Then the best choice would be. But just as Hyujin was about to decide on the reward he chose, Seo Juan suddenly said, looks like you got a special reward. He also congratulated him. He couldn't see what it was, so he asked. He just needed to wait, right? Hearing that, Hyujin replied yes, it takes time. He just needed to wait for a while. Seo Juan then didn't really mind it because they just needed to wait for a while. He then asked him to finish what he was doing, but when he turned his face away from Hyujin, he suddenly grinned. Hyujin just silent. Hearing that, he then reactivated the eye of perception on Seo Juan. Although his eyes were now not on him, but he could now see his disgusting smile thanks to the eye of perception. After glancing at Manhwa, Seo Yuan then put a cruel smile on his face. He could now finally see his rotten face. He also realized that Seo Yuan was targeting Manhwa. He thought he couldn't see it, so he started blatantly, ending his inner thoughts. Hyujin then said that he had chosen his reward. He would choose the Mandra gloves. Hearing that, the Mandra statue replied that it understood. It then handed the gloves to him. The Mandra gloves had a special tolerance to poison and protected the wearer from various types of infections. He also gained some additional stats after wearing the gloves. The Mandra statue hoped that this would be a useful reward in helping his journey in the future. Right after that, a system notification then appeared informing him that he had completed Mandras Plaza. After Mandras Plaza was successfully completed, the next scenario quest, the branching path, would begin. Manhwa was surprised when she got the notification. The branching path, it was the last path to the Soul Station dungeon. They were told to find a way to clear the Soul Station dungeon. If they failed to complete the dungeon, then a dungeon break would occur. There were 2 paths. At least one player had to enter each path. Manhwa was quite confused when she read that. Seeing her confusion, Hyujin then explained, "This is the last path. It also means that the Soul Station dungeon raid is almost over." Hearing that, Manhwa then asked if they could go home after this. Hyujin replied no, because it wasn't over yet. He also told Manhwa not to let her guard down and stay beside him. Manhwa understood and said she would be behind him, and when the 2 of them were about to leave, they were suddenly stopped by Seo Yuan. They then turned to him. Seo Yuan said that he was disappointed in him. Weren't they working together? It felt like they were just following his orders now. Not everyone also agreed with this, so it seemed a bit excessive. Didn't they have to split into 2 groups to follow the path? He thought they should divide themselves faster. Hearing that, Hyujin just said that if that was what he thought, then he and Manhwa would choose one path. As they saw before, the 2 of them were more than enough. Hearing that, Seo Yuan then praised his confidence. But he then asked how he could guarantee that the 2 of them were enough. It was good to be confident in one's abilities when entering a new place. But how could he know it would end well? So Hyun seemed to realize something after hearing him say all that. While Hyujin was silent for a moment after hearing him say that, he then said that he might have a point. He then asked him advice regarding how they should divide the groups. Hearing that, Seo Yuan then suggested. He thought dividing the groups based on balance would be better. A group of 3 people in one path, and a group of 4 people in another path. The group of 3 people would be underpowered, so Hyun would be in the group to make it balanced. Therefore, he wanted to make a suggestion. He asked him to be the leader of the group of 3 people. Meanwhile, Manhwa will be in the 4-person group, and she will act as their tank. He then asked his opinion regarding it. Manhwa seemed to feel anxious when she heard that. But Hyujin then immediately calmed her down by putting his hand on her shoulder. Hearing him ask his opinion, Hyujin then replied that he fucking hates it.